James too.
Hello.
God damn, I love this view.
Yeah.
There's so many keys on the one side, and is it actually a kitchen in the back?
Yeah, so there's a kitchen right back here. So this building is well, the property that me and my wife live on is like it's her aunt's old property that she bought back in the 80s. It's like 70 acres. And they discovered gold here back in the day, in like the early gold rush days, in like the early 1900s or whatever, in Oregon. And so this cabin, and there's another cabin were the original gold miner cabins out here. And Elsie's aunt refurbed it and put a little kitchen, and this room is like a little bathroom. And then I just took it over, so now it's the studio. So I have like a detached studio from the house.
This is why it's called Goldshed. It's a Goldshed.
Yeah, this is why it's called the Goldshed. Wes, one of the rough things about living in the woods is that I'm on satellite internet, so the internet a little funky out here as well. I'm isolated and get to be away. I don't have any neighbors, but there's as well.
Like you said, somebody purchased it, but you purchased it from, or is it like family owned?
It was a family property originally, but my wife Kelsey, who's my wife, we bought it 5 years ago, so it's ours now. But it was her aunt's for like 20 years before that.
Whose idea was it?
It was Kelsey's idea, my wife's idea. She grew up from around here. We met when we were in Northern California, Humboldt County, and we met on a weed farm, trimming weed out there, And so we were kind of getting sick of. She was going to school, and we were kind of getting sick of. We wanted to do something new after she graduated, and we were gonna maybe move to San Francisco and live in the city, and I was going to pursue music and all that kind of stuff. Oh, and then this whole farm kind of popped up, and we were like, well, maybe we should go do that instead. And that was 10 years ago. So we've been here for 10 years now. Yeah.
Do you have your own produce, like everything that you eat basically is from your own?
Not everything, but we do have like a huge veggie garden, and up until like a couple weeks ago, we had chickens for the last like 10 years. And, so we try to, I had to get a little creative with the vegetables and the food, just being at home and not having any restaurants around here, which is kind of like what helped lead me want to cook and stuff like that as well. But like,
and the cooking, I had the impression that you were strong on cooking right from the beginning. I didn't catch that you started cooking on the farm.
No, I definitely when I was a kid, I was working in a restaurant. So I just learned like basic knife skills back then. You get creative with it. You're like, I wonder what it takes. How do you make this? And do a couple of searches, and I will look at like a few different recipes and be like, okay, it's basically that. Like, I know how to measure and cut, so I think I could like experiment with this shit. You know what I mean? It's fun. It's kind of like making it, flipping, like collaging samples together. It's like, okay, this is what I have in the fridge. How can I flip this into like whatever? You know what I mean?
Cryp mentioned that, for instance, he said like, people who, if you are into beat making, don't tell me that you won't be able to cook.
You kind of make do. It's like you're kind of digging in the dollar section, but like whatever's in the back of your cupboard, you're like, I got these. I think I can make something, Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's shit,
How was the fermented pickle game?
So, when we first moved here, we were like really amped up on the idea of like homesteading. And we kind of went a little overboard. Am I going to eat all these? Like you're getting around to the next year and you still like have more space, everything left over. So it's like give and take, like learning how much you need, how much your friends need, and then sometimes we make hot sauce, sometimes we make pickles, sometimes we, whatever, something new. My friend who is the other part of Mossy Projects, Michal Menert, he's originally from Poland. So his family, when the Soviet Union was collapsing, like, we got to get the hell out of here, ended up in somewhere first, and then they landed in Colorado. But he lived the first part of his still speaks Polish with his family, and he's very American now, but all of his family still lives in Poland. And, he told me stories about.
They go over regularly?
He hasn't in a little while. I think since coronavirus or whatever, he hasn't gone anywhere. But he has his family comes over from Poland, came over for his wedding, and I met a bunch of his crazy uncles, and
Like, is it the same, your musical circle with the trophy beats that happened, I think, previously, right?
If you don't listen to trophy beats, you're whack, sucker.
Yeah, so it's all kind of the same, me and my buddy 96, who is the other guy in Trophy Beats.
Trophy Beats,
We met when I grew up in Montana, and he was going to school out in the town that I grew up in Missoula, and he was a DJ, scratch DJ. I worked at a record store. I also had a college radio show for about 6 years out there. Was like the hip hop guy in Missoula, Montana, which is not saying that much, but so then I met Dave out there, and I was rapping, he was DJing. We were kind of like trying to do that thing for a long time. And then, he's just like my best friend. We just, became, he's the DJ, I'm the rapper type of thing, and that kind of eventually progressed into Dave moved back to Chicago. It's at the same time I had met Michal Menert because I was promoting shows in Missoula as well. So he came through with him when he was a rapper and with his first band called Listen. And then him and the other guy that was in Listen, who is Derek Vincent Smith, aka Pretty Lights, had a group called Pretty Lights. Pretty Lights was like an early production. This was, early to mid 2000s. When I'm promoting shows, and they were kind of doing their thing. And then we became, they lived in Colorado, we lived in Montana, we did shows together back and forth. We just became friends. And Dave eventually moved back to Chicago, and I followed him out there. Prep School was the group that we played like house music and all that kind of stuff.
Which group? I lost the connection for a second.
It was called Prep School. So me and Dave evolved into Prep School, which was like a DJ. We were trying to be Daft Punk. We were like making this stuff, At the same time, Pretty Lights was blowing up, was getting really big in this like electro soul type of beats. This is like 2008 to 2000, 2006, 2008, somewhere in there. And so we were kind of watching our friends who were like our homies, like it was getting really, really big and starting to snowball into this big thing. And we were like, well, if they can do it, we can do it too, and he has his foot in the door already. We can kind of like sneak in with Pretty Lights to get into the scene, at the same time, Michal was kind of, Pretty Lights, Derek and Michal had gone a separate way, which is a whole nother long story. But they were still best friends, but Derek became just Pretty Lights. So the very first Pretty Lights record was produced by Michal and Derek. And then as Pretty Lights started to snowball, it just became Derek, and Michal became his own act under the Pretty Lights label. And we were reconnecting with those guys and sending them the beats that we were making, and kind of switching back and doing, they were doing shows in Chicago and we were doing shows out in Colorado and stuff like that. And then Pretty Lights just kept snowballing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, At the same time, prep school, I was kind of flying back and forth between Chicago and Northern California, where I had been like trimming weed and, you know, being able to make enough money to be just a DJ, even though I'm like, you know, working on a weed farm and DJing once in a while, I'm making beats as much as I can, but it kind of allowed me to focus a lot of effort and time on production and DJing, having this other income, you know. Dave is just really smart and like a computer whiz. So he was seeing Pretty Lights blowing up and the light show, and was like, well, his name's Pretty Lights. He should have like the biggest light show on the festival scene. And I think I know I can program enough content to like design a stage that would push Derek up to the next level. And so Dave was, and I was like, well, that's probably if you do that, then he's bound to let us get in our door with our music, you know? So you should go do that. Well, that turned into, you know, Dave always making music, but always also like building this other lighting, LED wall design, things like that, you know, that ended up pushing Pretty Lights to like the tippy top of like headlining festivals, and, you know, everything from Coachella to Bonnaroo to Lollapalooza to Electric Forest to like all the big festivals. Our best friends are like the headliner on the show, you know? And so Dave kind of started focusing more on the visual aspect of art and creation. All the while we were kind of sending beats back and forth, but you know, we were kind of, at least I was wanting to play like hype house music and up-tempo stuff, and more kind of getting into my roots, which were hip hop, you know, and making hip hop beats. So that's why me and Kelsey moved to Oregon. And I was like, well, these beats I'm making don't really, you know, prep school is this one thing. These really should be something different. And I don't know, I came up with the name Trophy Beats, and Dave was like, oh, well, I'm Trophy Beats now too. We're both Trophy Beats, you know, so let's do this now. So now we were sending stuff back and forth, and it being, you know, prep school just kind of turned into this up-tempo disco house, dubstep, hip hop shit into like really simple, breaky, loopy hip hop beats. And we kind of just changed the name overnight, you know. At the same time, I'm meeting, you know, me and Michael are friends, and, you know, eventually me and Michael just started sending stuff back and forth. And he moved out to California and came up for Thanksgiving one time, and we made a beat that ended up becoming a Mossy Projects beat before we called it Mossy Projects, you know, and kind of, so it was just kind of another spin-off of like our little group of friends all like, oh, I'll make a beat with you. Let's make a beat. Oh, let's have this call a project. Now you and I, let's make a beat and call it a project. Now we'll have this crew, and you know what I mean? It's all kind of like us living our little fantasy in our head. You know, it's almost like was more fun talking about it than it was like actually like putting out and actively trying to pursue a career, you know, I guess, kind of.
But
that makes sense.
By the way, do you still offer this, like renting out the studio to artists?
It happened, you know, it happened once with my friend Rashawn Ahmad and Rita J, a couple of MCs. They came up here. More, I was kind of like Rashawn is an MC, was in Rita J is a MC from Chicago. The two of those guys were talking about having a group together, and Rashawn knew that I moved to the farm. And when I moved out here, I kind of I noticed being out here and being isolated was a big push for me to work more and be more creative. And that's kind of how I helped to like, what I feel like change the sound, like being out here alone, disconnecting from the scene, allowed the sound to be this drastic change. And I knew that how productive I was being out here. And I was like, well, I have other friends that are stuck in the city. And I feel like if they could come out here and get away from their phone for a little bit, then maybe they would be productive too, you know? And so Rashawn, I talked to him about it, and he hit me up when he's like, hey, I'm going to do this project with Rita J. Is it cool if we come to the farm and write and record it there, you know? And I was like, yeah, that's cool, you know? So they came out, they recorded their Black Koala album like in this room, and they I'm not an engineer or anything. I kind of assisted as much as I could, but it's not like I was producing the project. I was more like, hey, I'll make you guys some food so you guys can stay in here and stay busy, you know. So do we rent out the space? No, but am I willing? Do I want to have friends come out here to hang out and create? Absolutely. You know, Michael would come out here and, you know, start visiting the farm, and we were really productive in this space. And whenever Dave would come out from Chicago, we'd be really productive in the space. And it got me thinking that there was just something about this old gold miner's cabin that like had this effect that people could really make some good music out here. You know, it just has a vibe in here. And even though it's this kind of like, you know, ratty cabin, it lets you be very creative out here, you know. And my friends have made some amazing music in here. So, you know, yeah.
I can imagine that it is that it lets you create on a very different level, simply because there is so little distraction.
Yeah. And in the beginning, like the internet was slow, phones don't work. So there's like zero distraction, you know, you can really just tap in and get stuff done, you know. And it's been really productive. Like we made 2 Mossy Projects albums in here. Black Koala was made in here. I've made thousands of trophy beats in here, you know, so yeah.
Like, is it still ongoing thing, the trophy beats? Because I didn't see the latest release was something around 2019 or something.
So yeah, I mean, it's still a thing, you know. Me and Dave haven't seen each other in a couple years now, but we basically have 3 full albums that are finished, you know, 95% finished. We got to go through, and I like to tinker with things and find dialogue samples and things like that. I mean, we have like a ton of music that hasn't been released, and I don't know why we wait. It's like the thing we all talk about on Thursdays is like, what are you doing? Like, release the music. And I feel like everybody says that to each other, but then they're like, I don't want to release mine yet, you know. So
what does it look like though? Like, how do you create so much with a person whom you don't see for years actively?
Yeah, we just, you know, I mean, for a while we were bombarding each other like every day, like, what do you think of this beat? And then you kind of like assume someone's going to sit down with it immediately and give, you know, we both have lives going on. So it's like, have you listened to that beat yet? Have you listened to that beat yet? Have you listened to that beat yet? You know, and then we kind of like stopped doing, you know, like started send him a batch, like here's 10, which ones do you like, you know? And he'd pick out a few and run them through his hardware and do things and then send them back, you know, and then I'll probably sit with them, you know, like we've created so much stuff that we don't finish for years, you know, like a lot of the Mossy Project stuff, we started like 3-4 years ago and then let them sit for like a year, maybe a year and a half before you revisit it or you finally find the sample that you're missing, you know? So everything's like a work in progress. There's no like timeline ever. It's kind of just like, oh, I found a sample for that one. You know, we work in spurts. Like the other thing is like, I have a full-time job with my farm. So there are certain times of the year when I just don't have the energy to sit here and be creative, you know? And then in my winter months is when I don't have all my outdoor work. And that's when I feel like I'm really productive. So I've always been one of these like really streaky producers where in the span of a week, I'll make like 50 beats and then I'll go for 3 weeks and not even come in the studio, you know? So how do we finish stuff? I don't know if we ever do finish it until we actually put it out. You know, you're kind of just like, okay, I'm sick of that one. Does that go with this one? Okay, let's call those good. You know, Dave makes some art, let's put it out. You know, it's like, I've stopped thinking about releasing music in like a schedule. Like, I need to do this because if I don't do this, I'm not going to build my audience and then I'm not going to be able to play a show or whatever. And now I kind of just really release music try to be as creative as I can and release music that I really enjoy. And that I think, like I don't have any expectations when it comes to what my music is going to do for a career or whatever. I'm always going to make beats. I'm always going to buy records. I'm always going to look for samples, but I don't expect it to ever be like blow up at this point, I guess. You know what I mean?
Is it because of the farming, like of the farming branch?
Yeah.
By the way, was it initially the idea to make it a weed farm, or?
Well, when we first moved here, legal weed was not, I mean, they had medical, but there was no like recreational cannabis legality yet, We did it as a medical farm for a little while, but that was more kind of like, it wasn't ever anything big. It was like whatever your legal limit was, which was, I think was 12 plants per person. So we had like 24 plants or something. When legal weed happened, we just kind of they're putting out all of these guidelines and zoning restrictions and all, this is where we're going to allow it to happen. These are the hoops you have to jump through to get it. And we were kind of following it because we're came from the industry, but we were like, kind of, can we do this? Like, can we jump in and pull this off? And once we realized that our property met all the requirements that they were making to allow you to produce on your property, we were kind of just like, fuck it. Let's see if we can make this happen. To the point where we were like, okay, I'm not going to let this thing fail. I'm going to do everything I can to like get us to become a successful company, So we definitely kind of, was that the intention when we bought the property? No, but once we realized that we could, and that there was like this door, like, well, these knuckleheads have a weed license. Why can't we have one? So we kind of didn't know any better and kind of jumped in, and then it ended up like working out for us, like it's still, you're farming. So there's a lot of things you can't control. You're at the mercy of a plant, that I think allows you to kind of brush things off a little bit more. Once you're used to it, you kind of like, well, not let things get you down too much, like you can kind of like work your way through situations that might otherwise seem pretty hard.
Wasn't it the bad fires last year that were hitting the area that was like this, I imagine, is devastating. Like, it's
crazy. I grew up in Montana, so I'm used to forest fires, but I'd never seen fires like that where like the cities are burning down, And it definitely is something that we think about a lot during fires. We're in the middle of the woods. If there's a fire, we got to dip real quick and decide what's important and what's not. So
you got a plan for that situation.
Yeah, ish. We got a plan ish.
Are those opium poppies still around?
So my mother-in-law she just loves plants, and for a long time she just collected seeds. So back in like the 60s or something, her and her husband were like or probably the 70s, or she's not that old, but traveling through Afghanistan, and she collected a bunch of seeds just because she likes the flowers, and she was throwing seeds all over, and she's like, oh, these ones are opium poppies. And I'm like, okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, all right. I get pretty flower,
And your mom, I take it she is a lucha libre fighter?
No, my mom's a stoner. She loves the fact that her son is a weed grower. And,
nice. So it's in the family.
Yeah, it's in the family a little bit.
If I understand, your dad is like huge on fishing, and you obviously kept that tradition going.
He's a musician. So my dad is a guitar player. He's a professional guitar player. He's a folk singer, and he plays like in like a honky tonk, which is kind of like a country rock, but not like country like you think about it, like Chet. He kind of like old country, Chet Atkins, George Jones, like those like old original country singers. So he's a musician. That's all he's ever done my entire life. So that's how he kind of gave me the musical bug, you know, like when I was early on digging through his record collection and laying all the records out on the floor to like look at the covers. And I think that's what kind of really like helped set me on like an infatuation with music. You know, while he played like was like a folk singer, we listened to a lot of everything from like, you know, James Brown and Sam Cooke to my mom was into like Michael Jackson and Cyndi Lauper and 80s music, you know, and so I was getting it from all sides, you know, the folk singer-songwriters like Van Morrison and Bob Dylan to the soul funk stuff like Staple Singers to, you know, a little bit of everything. And yeah, so that's how I think my dad's a really good guitar player. Like if he hadn't had kids, he probably would have been in Nashville and being a session player, you know.
Also, shout out to your grandmother. I think she passed, right? So rest in
That
peace.
was a while ago, yeah.
She made the best announcements for Trophy Beats for sure. I really dig that. And
He was like, she's like, what's
Trophy Beats is coming soon. Act like you know.
Perfect.
Trophy Beats? And I'm like, doesn't matter, Grandma. Just say it, you know.
a huge shout out to your wife as well. She kind of builds stuff as well, like that little pavement and stuff. So
yeah, you know, she's a go-getter. She will work, you know, if I'm gonna have anybody on my team, I'm gonna pick her. She's gonna be the number one pick because she's gonna like get after it, you know. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was been, you know, she didn't know. I mean, she knew when we first met. I told her I was like, "Oh, I'm a DJ," and she's like, "Yeah, whatever." I'm like, are you really a DJ? You know, I'm like, "Yeah, I am." Like, come watch the show I'm playing. You know, but it's never like that. Was never like, you know, I didn't land her because I'm a DJ. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, there's like a very strong connection there. We were just kind of drawn to each other. And we've actually met in the trim room, and we left the hill and we were together ever since. Like we just show, you know, so. Yeah, she gets after it. She pushes me a lot to go bigger.
But she seems to support you a lot, or at least like from the birthday presents that you posted. It's like, that's quite cool.
I think she understands that music is kind of a therapy for me a lot, you know, so she really supports me and encourages me to come in the studio as much as I can to create. And she's, you know, gave me this cabin. I get to have this whole cabin to myself to be like my space, you know. Mm-hmm. And whenever she's out, like she'd bring home some records, be like, "Oh, what do you think about? I got these records for you," you know, and she's done pretty good. She's got a pretty good eye. She's got me a couple records that I made a couple of pretty dope beats off of, you know. So, yeah.
What does she say on Thursdays?
On Thursdays, you know, she was like, "Oh, that's cool. You're going to your class." You know, I always called it my class. You know, and then she came in one time and I was like smoking a blunt or, you know, and she's like, "So are you in class right now?" And I'm like, "Well, class is kind of, you know, we're kind of just all hanging out and like shooting the shit." You know, she's like, "So like, is somebody teaching something in there?" I'm like, "Well, kinda, you know," but, you know, so now she's a little bit more like, "What are you doing in there on Thursdays?" You know, and, but she still lets me get in and hang out with the homies and all that, you know. She hasn't shut it down all the way yet.
I mean, it is a lot, like it is a lot of material that is being, like a lot of knowledge that is being shared every single session.
In the very beginning, you know, the session, like I saw, the sessions were like 4 to 5 hours. And then I started being like looking and you know, looking at my phone, you guys are still going at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And I was like, damn, do y'all wives just let you like hang out in here all the time? Like, how do you pull this off? You know, and RTO was like, oh, she's asleep right now, you know, and everybody's like, you can get away. And I'm like, how do you guys spend the whole day in there, dude? Like, you know, you guys wives, you know, my wife's pretty cool, but it seems like you guys got some pretty cool wives too, you know, or let you.
How did you bump into the sidechain?
So I think initially I had discovered drums through, I was listening to like maybe a producer podcast or something, and I saw the name Stolen Drums, and I was like, oh, that's like pretty cool, you know, it's in all caps, there's no vowels, this is like a pretty cool name, I'm gonna check this dude out, you know. And then I discovered his music for the first time, which was I think the Veggie Tacos series. I was like, oh, this dude is really dope. Like all this music is kind of like the stuff that I've been trying to make, you know? And then, so I started following him on Twitter maybe, or Instagram. I can't remember which one it was first, and then I noticed that his birthday is the day after my birthday. At the beginning, I thought we had the same birthday. So I was like, oh, this dude drums, me and him are the same person. Like we make this like weird broken beat music and we have the same birthday, you know, even though it turned out later. So I really started following it, you know, and I think I bought the Slappy Drums one, the first kit initially. And then I was on the email list. And then when the beginning of the pandemic happened and Sidechain, you know, come join this group of, you know, sent out the email blast. I'm starting this thing, come check it out, you know. I think Session In was already happening as well, the Friday night beat thing that like Cryp and those guys do, Donnell Smokes do on Friday nights with Slop Funk. So that had already started. So Sidechain kind of seemed like this other version of that, you know. And so I jumped in, and I don't know if I was at the first one and I was there relatively early. And I actually noticed Cryp and was like, I recognize this name, you know, this dude kind of I like recognized him. And then I, you know, did my little Google search and I was like, oh, this is Cryptic One from Adam. Like he's in this group, you know. And I had already, when I was in Montana and promoting shows, I was really into Def Jux and just the underground hip hop scene, like in those like early 2000s. So when Cryp was in there, I was like, okay, I'm sold on this. This is where I can go like test my music amongst people who I respect their opinion. I've been listening to them for a long time and kind of see where the stuff that I make fits amongst the people who I'm really looking up to as far as music creation and stuff, you know. So yeah, that was in the beginning, you know. It was a very kind of nerve-wracking because I haven't been around, you know, I'm on a farm, isolated for like the last 10 years, don't really know how to interact with like the public as much as I did when I was, you know, trying to be on the scene. So I was a little nervous and shook to play for the first couple times. Like, what are they going to think about this like weird, like major chord, 5 samples going on, you know?
Now I break weed up on it.
Oh, okay. Like, this is, you know, it was really encouraging. Like, okay, maybe I am doing something right. Like, if I'm getting props from people whose music I really like, and you can tell they're being genuine, you know, and so that's kind of what got me on the hook for sure.
It's very interesting because you were making beats for quite a while before you or like when you joined Sidechain, isn't?
Yeah.
Didn't you?
I feel like I've been starting beats for quite a while. Like I'm at the point, I'm one of those guys that like just starts a lot of beats and never really kind of finishes them. And once for a while, then I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave it like it is, you know, like, fuck it, move on to the next one, you know? someone early on told me that your first 100 beats are gonna suck. No matter how good you think they are, they're gonna suck. So you might as well just make as many as you can in the beginning and get them out of the way. You know, just make them. Don't worry about the little things in the beginning. Don't worry about the mix. Don't worry, don't like keep thinking you're gonna release it. Just make it, move on. Because your first 100 beats you're gonna look back at and be like, okay, these are pretty trash, So I've always been just kind of like, okay, make another one. Make it good, get as far as you can until you're kind of stuck, and then move on. And then kind of come back to those beats later on, a couple weeks, a month, a year, whatever, and then listen to them again and be like, okay, this has potential. I'm going to add another sample into it or whatever. For a long time, I was just make as many as you can. And eventually they're going to sound finished, and then I kind of realized it's good to go back to keep everything. Like I have every beat I've ever made in Ableton. And I go back to those early sessions and be like, oh, the sample's cool. Maybe I'll reach out the sample, but these drums are trash, just kind of like revisit ideas, I guess, because you never know how your ear is going to progress and change and mature. And you might hear something, even if it's 3-4 years down, later, that you didn't hear the first time,
Is it an exercise that you do, like revisiting old beats to?
It's not really an exercise. I more kind of do it out of boredom.
Okay.
Like if I get to the point where I'm not feeling like, I feel like my records have been exhausted, or I don't have any samples, or I kind of try to force myself to work in the studio or to be in the studio in some way, whether or not I'm actively trying to fit a sample into a track, or just going through old stuff, or just listening to music, or going down a YouTube rabbit hole, listening for weird dialogue samples, or whatever. Like I'll pull sources from everywhere, and you kind of never know when you're going to hear something that is going to work. So you kind of, I have a catalog of like the last 20 or 30 beats in my mind. I can kind of know what they are just by the names, and I'm like, oh, this, maybe I need a horn in this song. So if I hear something, I can kind of go back through and flip and see if it works, or I'll just kind of go back and just see how I've progressed. Go back 5 years and be like, oh, let's listen to what I made in July of 2015. So I keep all my beats in months. So everything I made in January, everything new folder, everything I made in February, new folder, March, new folder, and then those get categorized by year. So then I have a back catalog of 12 years of Ableton beats, back to like Ableton 8 or something like that.
Yeah, you did start in Ableton, right? So this is like the first DAW, or did you?
I started in Reason.
Okay.
I did use Reason for about a year, and then Pretty Lights and Michael and Dave were all like, "You got to get on Ableton, dude. Like everybody uses Ableton. This is what you need to use." So that I made a few beats in Reason, and I never feel like I really learned it. I was kind of just like, it was in the first 100 beats of my career, so I'm like, don't really look back at those and be like, oh, this was really good, because they all kind of suck. But yeah, started on Ableton in 8.
And you started adding hardware at the same time, or because you have like a nice collection of?
That kind of started. When we were doing the prep school, we were living with a kid who had a bunch of hardware, and Dave has always had MPCs and keyboards and stuff. Even though we were kind of working in the DAW, we would record in some synthesizer parts or whatever, and then I gradually started trying to collect my own, because I was living in California and the studio stuff was in Chicago. So I felt like I, started collecting a few things here and there, and it's gradually progressed to what it is now, I don't use them on everything. I kind of fiddle around with them. You know, I definitely don't know how to play anything, but I can figure out chords and progressions and things if I sit down with it long enough. But I'm not a natural musician by any sense of the means, you know.
But they are all actively connected, right? So anytime you feel like I want to,
everything's connected. And I just have a little Mackie 8-channel mixer,
mm-hmm.
and then I have all my synthesizers plugged into this, and that goes into my sound card. And then I also have my 303 and 404, so I can route audio through those and back into Ableton, you know. So yeah, it's like a work in progress. There's a few things I still want, but I'm just not willing to pull the trigger on them yet, you know.
What do you want? What's the next, like?
I mean, I think everybody wants a Rhodes. I want you know, I would love to have a Wurlitzer. Michal Menert, my buddy, has a Wurlitzer that's like just amazing. I'd love, you know, I'm a nerd. I want it all. I want it all, you know. I want everything cool, you know. I feel like drums and that, like, oh, now I'm going to get a guitar. Now I'm going to get a bass. And I want it all. But, you know, it's a matter of what I can fit in here as well. The room is getting smaller and smaller. So
that part, like, it sounds like I didn't, like, every piece is thoroughly, like, you chose it to be there to take up that space. And which one is your favorite though? Like, what's the piece of gear that you use this love for?
I think my favorite one is this one. Can't really see it. It's a realistic MG1, and it's an old Radio Shack synthesizer that they made in the 80s. But it has a real Moog filter in it. So it's like a cheap way to get the Moog sound. I found it in Portland and got it in Portland. And then I took it to a repair shop there to get it cleaned and all that kind of stuff. And the guy was like, oh, these are awesome. You know, you can modify these. So I was like, oh, really? So I had it modified. So the second oscillator, he dropped down an octave, and there's a pulse width mod that he added on it. So that thing can get like some really, really low growl bass tones to it. It's all over the Mossy Projects record.
Okay.
And so that's my favorite one. It's unique because I modified it. It doesn't sound like a normal MG1. You know, so yeah, I really like that. I want a Casio CZ5000, which is
one or you purchased.
I want one. That's what I'm kind of on the hunt for right now. And then I just saw today on Craigslist where I'm at, there's somebody in town has a Hammond B3 organ.
Okay.
It has a Leslie with it, with like which is the amp that spins. And I'm like, it's been on for like a month, so I know the guy still has it. You know, he just reposted it, and I've been eyeballing it. You know, I'm like, oh man, I'm trying to figure out a reason, like an excuse as to why I shouldn't buy this thing. And it's huge. I mean, I don't think I could fit it in here, you know, comfortably. But those things just don't come up a lot of times, you know.
Like, do you replace gear, or are you like, if you buy it, you keep it?
Yeah, I've never, I mean, I had an MPC 4000 for a little while that I sold because I could never really figure out how to make a beat on it. There wasn't like a lot of videos for the 4000 when I had it early on. I was already like so deep in Ableton that when I try to sit there and do something on the MPC, I'm like, why am I taking so much time to chop this break when I can do it in 2 fucking seconds in Ableton, you know? So I needed the money, and, you know, so I sold it to my buddy. So yeah, that's the one piece of gear I've sold. Everything else I've just kept.
Run out of new ideas.
Do you ever go on the SP to like make a beat on the SP?
Once in a while, you know, I used to like early on, but I have my muscle memory so down in Ableton that it's just like I can just route audio through all of my hardware and still get the color and the sound of the SPs. And I my workflow is just so much faster in Ableton now. I've definitely like thought about like if I go on a trip or something sometime to take the SP or the PO33 to like be creative and work on the road. But a lot of times, I don't know, I'll do that and it's hard I'm so comfortable in this space that I feel like when I'm not in here, it's a little bit of an adjustment to work again, whether I'm in a hotel room or even at Menert's studio in California. Like I've made a lot of beats in there, but it always takes me a little while before I'm like comfortable enough, and because he's got patch bays and all this kind of stuff. So sometimes I've created so many beats a certain way in here that I feel like I have muscle memory with it, to the point where I'll be in here looking for samples or listening to, I'll be drinking and I'll like pass out and realize I've been in here. It's like way past my bedtime, but I haven't did anything yet. And so then I'll just throw together something real quick in like 10 minutes and just so I can say I'm productive, even though I haven't, I feel like that's like the muscle memory part of it. It's just like, okay, chop, boom, 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 put the drums, run it through the 404, beat done, but it's not always the best beat, but there's definitely like some pretty cool things where I'm like revisit, songs. And I'm like, I do not remember making this beat at all. Like, where did this beat come out of thin air, And I feel like sometimes when you're working really fast and you have like that muscle memory where you're like, you just are creating a lot, and sometimes there's something good, and sometimes you don't even remember that you made it. So you might as well like go back through, like, where did these beats come from? Like, oh, this one's kind of hot. Maybe I'll develop this into a thing,
What is your favorite thing in Ableton? I
don't know if this is like a technique. I'm sure it's not a technique that I created. When I've showed it to a couple people, they were like, how did you figure that out? So the sample is this. So kind of, that's not really like a beat going on. There's kind of this drifty little feel, so it should work pretty good for this. So what
I lost you for a second. You're back now. I lost you for a second.
Okay. Down here is where I'm looking at the waveform of the audio. So what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll say warp. And then what I do is I say loop, okay? And I will set the loop, like typically, I already kind of did this, but typically the loop will just be like this in the beginning. So then I'll make it so it's the whole song. And I will start to place that with the drums. So that, okay, so what I'll do is like move the start of where this the cursor goes, but if you look up here, it changes the shift of the audio too. So so now it's like, and then what I'll do is, because everything's looped, I can take this part of the audio up here and I'll put a slice the audio right here. And then I'll go into this one, which is basically the next sequence, but I can change the start of the starting point. So I can move that audio like that, right? And let's see if I just kind of loop this up real quick. Let me just get to the point. Okay, now here's a little 4-bar there. So then you got like, I could put another chop right here and go to wherever in all of this audio, you know, so you can.
That's it.
Or I will like, you know, like this kind of sounds like something that will resolve the loop. So I'll move that over there, put another slice here. This can go back to, you know, wherever, maybe like. So, you know, I kind of will chop it that way. And then you can go in here and get it off the grid. So that's like Command E. Oh, it's 2. So you take it off the grid like that. So then you can really go in and fine tune what part of that sample it's falling in. You know what I mean? Well, and what, you know, what a big thing that allows me to do is